Welcome back to Big Mouth and welcome to the dceu daily. Remember, you can tag and follow me and speak to me over on Twitter at Movies TV Man. And what a negative place that Twitter is right now, especially movie Twitter and DC Twitter, and we all know why that is. I think the Justice League 2017 reshoots should be on a kind of big screen as you walk into Hollywood, and it should be an example of how not to run a production. I think the inception and the origins of the DC Extended Universe and how that whole universe was developed from the beginning should be put out there as well for how you shouldn't run an extended universe, a movie franchise. Everything is absolutely wrong. We can look at the movies. We can say Man of Steel's great. We can say BVS is great. I believe that. Even the weird cut of Suicide Squad is great. That's my truth. Wonder Woman, one of the greatest CBMs ever made, right? Justice League, let's not talk about Justice League. There's no point. Zack Snyder's Justice League, great movie. Aquaman, in my point of view, is a great movie. Shazam is a great movie, especially for children and families, right? Birds of Prey and the Emancipation of One Harley Quinn has got toxic commentary, but very entertaining as well. And then Wonder Woman 84 may not be as good as the first Wonder Woman movie, but it's certainly very entertaining and it's solid enough. So not the best thing ever, but you could go through the MCU and say, pick out some films that are not the best ever. Not every movie has to be the best ever. So when you look at the DC Extended Universe, it's not a terrible franchise. It's not the best one ever, but it's pretty cool and it's got some groundbreaking moments. And then when you walk away from the DCEU and you go over there at DC Dark, which right now we've only got one movie and nothing's been done since, which is weird, but typical of Warner Brothers, isn't it? The Joker movie is one of the best CBMs ever made, referencing mental illness, male mental health within the Joker character. So it's a beautiful piece of work by Joaquin Phoenix and Todd Phillips. So all in all, when you see the DC movies made since 2013, you can say, actually, these are pretty good movies, right? But no one's talking about the movies anymore, right? Everyone's talking about the different issues. You know, it's interesting. When I first started reading the Ray Fisher Hollywood Reporter interview, I was like, I'm going to be Team Ray Fisher. I want to restore the Snyderverse. I didn't know what was in it when I was reading it out, right? And I was like, okay, that's cool. But the further I got into it, the further I realized that Ray has his own agenda here. It's a political agenda. It's weaponizing Warner Media and Warner Brothers Pictures as some kind of terrible racists. I don't think they're racists, right? But it doesn't look good when you want to wipe minorities out of your film. It doesn't look good. Now, that doesn't look, because there's different types of racism as well. We've got to be clear here. There's the racism where people, will attack you and hurt you because you're different, right? You're from a different minority. Like those Asian people who were murdered, right? Probably because they were Asian, right? That's racism of the worst kind. But there's other kinds of racism. There's people who don't give minorities work in their companies. That's terrible racism as well. I hope we live in a kind of film industry now and companies are run in a very different way. I think it's gone the other way now. I think it's gone too far now with this representation and inclusion strategy, where it's, especially since Mr. Floyd was murdered by the policeman, everyone in the entertainment industry is employing people of colour. No other minority is getting a look in and nobody else is getting a look in. That's too far, because then you are not employing Asian people. You are not employing Native Americans, right? America, morally belongs to the Native Americans. And they don't have big roles in the industry and they don't get cast in the industry. That is wrong. So because a person of colour was murdered in the most terrible way anyone can be murdered, by a policeman, someone you should trust, even if they arrest you, you should be able to trust that person not to kill you. So Hollywood took it upon themselves, because they're full of alt-leftists, right? Alt-leftists and far-rights are the worst type of political people, right? Because they all hate different types of people, right? That's the problem. And it's clear to me now that Ray Fisher is part of the far left. And we heard kind of phrases in that interview by straight white males used in a derogative kind of fashion. And when you use them in a derogative fashion, you are being racist yourself. What's wrong with being a straight white male? Am I a straight white male? I don't know. Greek Cypriot, born and bred in the UK, call me what you want, right? Let's say I am straight, right? Is there anything wrong with being a straight man? Am I a bad person? I mean, I'm not perfect. I can be a bad person. I can be a good person. I think that's all of us. And Ray Fisher must understand this as well. He has flaws and he has good points and he has bad points, right? He's not perfect, right? You can call other people's bad behaviour out, Ray, but it doesn't make you an angel. And I think as long as we recognise that, and we don't seem to recognise that, because I go through my kind of timeline on social media, especially Twitter, and that's what I see. So basically here we've got people saying, you said this, we didn't, you did, but I can't be a racist, you know. I've done this and I've got a black friend and all this nonsense, right? So everyone's accusing people, right? So I don't believe that Warner Media or Warner Brothers Pictures are racist. I certainly don't believe Jeff Johns is a racist. And we still don't know who made the angry black man kind of terrible thing to say, right? But I think that is coming out all wrong. Because let me draw you a scenario. What if Jeff Johns or Toby was saying, we don't want the stereotype of an angry black man? Is that racist? No. In fact, it seems to me that Toby and Jeff and everybody else were concerned about Ray Fisher and his character being seen as an angry black man as a stereotype. Because that's the kind of thing we saw 20, 30, 40 years ago and people were complaining about, quite right too, right? Because once you stereotype a black person as angry all the time, and then we get the kind of stereotypes of people of colour being criminals and this and that. This is what I think they were talking about. They were concerned of the stereotype rather than anything racist. And it seems to me that Ray's kind of purposely misconstruing this to make them look bad. So there's a war going on here. And I think there are several agendas going on here. Listen, the whole thing is there's a battle for the DCIP. Now, whether you're a Snyder fan or you're not a Snyder fan, I am. But Snyder wants to be in charge of the DC Extended Universe. He wants to be in charge of the entire franchise. Warner Media and Warner Bros. Pictures are absolutely correct about that. And I think he's willing to fight for them. And he's weaponized us, his fandom, to try and get him back in the position he was before. Because he's raving mad about that he's not there. I'm raving mad that he's not there. Right? Because I think what he did was sensational. But there is an issue with Zack. There is an issue the way he makes his movies. Not that I don't like his movies, that they're movies that don't appeal to everyone, especially the mainstream normie family audience. That's problematic for the bottom line. I think if we're fair with each other, we can admit that whether we love Zack or not, right? So there's a problem here. So there's two agendas here. Ray Fisher is a far leftist, trying to put forward some propaganda while he fights to restore the Snyderverse. So these are the two things he's doing. So if we look at that interview yesterday, and I think I mentioned it when I read it out on the video, right? I don't know if these videos are up yet because basically I woke up this morning because I always upload my videos overnight and they weren't ready. I deleted them and started uploading them again. So I don't know if they're even up yet. I hope you enjoyed them. If they're up, hopefully, eventually they'll be up. But my internet shit, it takes like 10 hours to upload one video, let alone two videos at the same time. So I'm sorry if it still hasn't happened for you yet. We shall see. Anyway, we're reacting to what happened yesterday. So as I say, I look at this interview, right? And, you know, Grace was teasing this great expose and I was getting very excited because I was at least hoping that Ray had such a big bomb in this interview that it would help us, for Warner Media to clear the decks out and restore the Snyderverse. The great dream is, of course, for Zack to run the whole thing, but basically just to have the Snyderverse continue. So I was hopeful of that, and I didn't really care what Ray said, whether it was a truth, fiction, I don't care, right? I just want to restore the Snyderverse, right? That doesn't sound very immoral, and I'm sorry if I'm not standing on a mountain screaming, freedom! Freedom for all minorities, representation, inclusion. It isn't really my bag. I don't really care. I'm passionate about storytelling, movies, TV dramas, from the form of entertainment and creativity. And I think that's one of the things that I see now is, Ray Fisher says accountability over entertainment. But I think with people from Ray's side of the political argument, I think it's, what did I say? What's the word? I forgot the word already, right? So it's basically now what it is. It's representation over entertainment. First, it will be accountability over entertainment. You can see that entertainment is second in Ray's slogan. And then it will be representation, inclusion, and entertainment last. In fact, that's what it already is. They're just not saying it that way. Do you understand? Accountability. Well, who is accountable? The people who run Warner Media, Warner Brothers Pictures, Joss Whedon. For me, that interview pretty much didn't give us anything new. So let's talk about the Krypton situation with Jeff Johns saying he didn't want an actor of colour playing Seg-El, the grandfather of Superman. I think that Jeff Johns is well within his rights not to want an actor of colour to play Seg-El, right? And before you start screaming racist like people normally do before they hear the rest of what someone's got to say, let's look at Krypton. I'm a big Krypton fan. I watched the whole of the 2 seasons, right? And one thing that none of you can deny, if you saw the show, is that half of Krypton's audience, or nearly half, Krypton's cast, is populated with actors of colour. In fact, you could argue they're the only minority in the bloody show. There's no Native Americans or anyone else, but it's very well represented. It's got great African American representation. In fact, African British representation, right? People of colour were very well represented in Krypton. There you go. I said it. So you're telling me a show that's basically so well represented for people of colour should have taken the decision to have an actor of colour play Superman's grandfather? No. I'm sorry, because now we're taking it too far. So there's no racism there as far as I'm concerned, right? Oh, everyone, basically, the way Ray puts it, you can weaponize it as making Jeff Johns a racist for saying, I don't want an actor of colour to play Seg-El, Superman's grandfather. But it's not racist in my book. It's not a smoking gun. But as I say, you can weaponize it. It sounds really bad. So again, that doesn't really expose anything apart from the fact that Jeff Johns said, I don't want an actor of colour to play Superman's grandfather. I want him to look like Henry Cavill, right? Now, of course, Krypton originally was going to be a Man of Steel prequel starring Russell Crowe and Michael Shannon, which would have been awesome. This is what we all wanted, but then they went back and they changed it. Then they went back and changed it again. So Krypton was a great show, great representation in it, just like Superman and Lois. There's a lot of Latino representation, but people of colour, if we're honest, don't like Latino representation. You see, a lot of people of colour in the industry just want more and more representation for themselves. And when you give them representation, then they argue how they're being represented. And the stuff about Joss Whedon. Oh, Joss Whedon messed with Gal. We already knew that. Gal told us in the build-up to Wonder Woman 84, right? We didn't know he was bragging he was going to destroy her career. But so what? Joss Whedon, we know his toxicity. We know he's not a particularly nice guy, right? If you believe everything you've heard about him, right? From the reshoots of Justice League 2017. He's gone. He's been fired. He's been blacklisted in Hollywood. Why are you telling us about Joss again? What's the point? It's done, right? You can't hurt Joss anymore, right? And I understand you might want to, but it's pointless again. Now, you may be trying to show us what kind of people Toby and Jeff are for bringing him in, but it's done. It's dusted. So I look at this interview there yesterday that I read out to you that I was excited was going to be this big expose and maybe get us to restore the Snyderverse, because that is my only priority. Actually, was it Lightcast or someone else saying we need to stop being obsessed with entertainment? And people talking about, Ray pointing out that he was going to do 2 weeks of work on the Flash movie and it was going to be paid out like a cameo. Well, 2 weeks worth of work may be a lot of work for the actor, but it's not a lot of screen time, Ray, and probably just is a cameo, to be honest. And again, it's a misrepresentation of the facts from Ray Fisher. Look, if you want to scream, I stand with Ray Fisher blindly and not analyse anything, that's up to you. And maybe my channel and me is not for you. I'm not for a lot of people. I'm a truth speaker. I speak my truth, not the universal truth, not your truth, not Ray Fisher's truth, not Zack Snyder's truth, Mickey's truth, Mick's truth, right? I was actually born Michael, then it went Mike, then it's Mick. So you can call me what you want, you probably call me worse, right? But here's the thing, I can only say things how I find them. So there's a lot of misrepresentations here. But what I can say in Ray's defence is that Joss Whedon acted terribly. But then let's analyse and go back and look at the booyah thing, right? I can't believe serious people from a studio and an actor were arguing whether or not this actor should say booyah or not. So Ray's argument is, I don't like black actors having slogans, which I think is ridiculous. Again, he's angry about the angry black man thing, but he's quoting, what you talking about, Willis? By the way, I love that slogan. Am I a racist? Was Clint Eastwood doing himself dirty by saying, go ahead, make my day? I mean, how far do you want to fucking take this, Ray? So it's a pathetic argument. Now, me, if I was Joss Whedon and Jeff Johns and Toby and John Berg, I would say, do you know what? It's only a fucking word. Let's placate him. Let's take it out. That's what I would have done, because it doesn't matter. But clearly, this phrase meant a lot to Jeff Johns. He's a fan of the comics. He's written a lot of Cyborg. But another comic book writer of colour said it broke his heart to give Cyborg that phrase all the time. Again, I'm not a person of colour, so I don't understand what the beef is. But I do understand why Zack wouldn't have wanted booyah in his film, because it is childish, it is a family-friendly thing to do. But at the end of the day, it's not a big deal. These people were arguing about something so minuscule, right? Ray Fisher was being petty, Jeff Johns was being petty, Joss was being petty, everyone was being petty, right? As far as I'm concerned, right? So we don't want to see racial abuse, racist people working in Hollywood. We don't want actors of colour and minority and women being treated badly because they're women and minorities, right? That's a fact. But we also can't have actors dictating to creative writers and directors what happens in their movies. We talk about freedom of creativity, artistic, right? Artistic freedom, right? How can directors, how can creatives have artistic freedom if you've got an actor basically saying, no, I don't want to do that, I don't want to do this? No. Basically, because by the time you execute the final piece of work, it's not going to be your vision, it's going to be disjointed, it's not going to work because you were trying to save the blushes of some actor. Now, Zack was happy to bend the knee for Ray. He put him together with the writer, and they came up with some stuff. Now, I believe in the Snyder Cut that Ray and Chris Terrio came up with some great stuff, and it worked. 3 people decided to work together, and it worked. And that's fine. But Zack works slowly on a movie. That's a 4-hour movie. So you can afford to do that. Now, Ray Fisher was upset with Joss Whedon because he didn't want to have dialogue with him. But when you've been brought in to rewrite and reshoot a movie and it's still going to be released on the same release date, you ain't got no time to be talking to people. Believe you me, I know from experience it's difficult. And the last thing you want is difficult people causing you difficulties, right? And it's going to make you mad. It's going to make you angry, and it's going to make you act like you wouldn't normally act, right? So this whole situation could have been avoided, right? If they just let Zack fucking finish his arc, right? But they didn't. The DCEU is a clusterfuck from its first development. And this is where the situation is now. They're going to say one thing, Ann Sarnoff and Warner Brothers Pictures will come back with a hit piece on Variety, and then Ray will go to another journalist, And I mean, coincidentally, that journalist who did the Hollywood Reporter interview and piece with Ray Fisher says that Warner didn't want her to do it. They really, really didn't want her to do it. And this is an interesting statement because these are powerful people. They can find a way to stop you if they want. Let's be honest. I know where the bodies are buried and I know how the industry works. It's interesting, isn't it? It seems to me there's something else at play here. It's like she made sure we knew they didn't want it to happen. But I'll repeat, if they didn't want it to happen, it wouldn't have happened, my dear. It's as simple as that. You don't write it. Basically, forget it. That, the Hollywood Reporter could have easily said, no, we're not going to wind up Warner Brothers here, right? And the Hollywood Reporter can be like a bit of a mouthpiece for Hollywood. We know that. As is Variety. As is Deadline. So it's interesting why all of a sudden they decided to allow him to do this. It's like Warner Media wanted this to happen. It's extraordinary. There's a divide all over the place. Warner Media versus Warner Brothers Pictures, right? Ray Fisher versus Warner Media, right? And WB Pictures. I think he's more against WB Pictures than Warner Media, but he threw them up under the bus over the investigation a little bit. Did this do any lasting damage? Is this going to restore the Snyderverse? I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think there's anything we haven't heard before. There's a few things, we did hear, was it in the interview or was it later on from the internet that actually Ben Affleck in the 2017 reshoots wanted to walk out with the cast and crew, and not everyone wanted to walk out because it's all right for a millionaire actors to walk out, right, and stand by their morals. But when you've got a family to support, if you're a camera person or you're doing the props, you can't afford to walk off and have that director blacklist you in the whole industry, right? So it's difficult. But apparently Affleck wasn't happy, and quite right too. But again, this goes back to Joss Whedon and the actual reshoots, and it's done right. Joss is gone. Now I know you're trying to create a situation to get Toby removed and to get Jeff removed, even though you said you don't want anyone to get fired. Yes, you do, because you said you don't think these people are fit to run this company or any other company. That means you want them fired, right? And then we look at the issue of it with Walter Hamada, where he said that Walter Hamada was blocking the investigation, interfering with the investigation, right? Then in the interview he said, well, I didn't mean it like that. I just meant blah, blah, blah. Basically, he's a Warner Brothers Pictures and Warner Media employer. If they say jump, he's got to say how high. He had to do what he was told. They told him clearly to dissuade Ray from going forward and exposing Jeff Johns and the rest of them, right? But throwing Joss Whedon under the bus. That clearly wasn't Walter Hamada's idea. He didn't want to do it, but he's got to do what his paymasters want him to, right? And as I said from the beginning, and this is why Ray really triggered me when he started going after Walter Hamada, he doesn't seem to get it, right? And he accuses, Ray seems to accuse everyone's racist if you talk to Ray, right? Every straight white person or white male, like they're the targets these days, right, are racists. Aren't you a racist, Ray, though? Isn't using the term straight white male in a derogative sense racist and even sexist? I think it is. So that's the problem. Hatred doesn't solve hatred. It doesn't matter if you're on the right side or the wrong side. If you start with hate, then your target comes at you with hate. And there's never peace and there's never unity. And these kind of conversations just cause, no. We've seen it with the fandom menace, haven't we? Right? They say this, that says that, bum, you're a racist, I'm not a racist, I'm on the right side, you're on the wrong side. Basically false accusations all the time. And so when I look at this interview, and I just don't think it's that new. I don't think there's much there to say, oh my God, what's going to happen next? And a lot of people on Twitter, especially this Restore the Snyderverse fandom, really think this is the silver bullet. But I don't think it is. People will talk about it today. People will talk about it tomorrow. and then the next story would happen. And then we got a bunch of lies yesterday that they were going to force Matt Reeves to cut a trailer for the Batman to kind of distract from this. They didn't do anything. They didn't make any announcements, right? Nothing to distract. Nothing happened. So this kind of makes me think that they didn't care about what happened, even though, according to this journalist, and I mean, I can't call her a liar, it just doesn't make sense. This is a regurgitated interview with facts and statements we've already heard before, mostly. It's very long, right? And it's like the highlights on Match of the Day. That's what it seemed to me, right? This happened, yes, we know. That happened, yes, we know. That happened, yes, we know. The Joss Whedon stuff is pointless, as I say, because he's gone. So you can't use Joss Whedon to restore the Snyderverse, right? Because he's gone. Whether Joss Whedon's a racist or not, I don't know. Certainly, there's issues with Joss Whedon, right? He's gone. He hasn't got a job anymore, right? So, that's it. That's it. Walter Hamada is still the president of DC Films. Toby Emmerich is still in charge of the whole movie division on HBO Max and at Warner Bros. Pictures. And Sarnoff is still the CEO of Warner Bros. Pictures. And Jason Kilar is basically the president of Warner Media. He's interesting, Jason, isn't he? Because he doesn't really seem to say much. He doesn't say anything derogative. He's a very positive guy. He shows off about the movies and the history of the entity, but he never goes and does one of these big hit pieces. That's not his role, obviously. He's supposed to be the smiler. That's his role. Interesting. Will he ever come out and speak truth? It's a very, very inflammatory situation for Warner Media. But then I'd ask you this. Did anyone else, apart from the Restore the Snyderverse community and the people who work in the DCEU, take any notice of that Hollywood Reporter article? If you were going through your timeline and you saw that, Ray Fisher says that, aren't you going to think, boring, not again, aren't you just going to move on if it's nothing to do with you? If you're a movie fan, are you interested in this? I wonder, is anyone interested in this? Because when you do these pieces, right, you want as many people from outside your community to see this and be outraged. And I don't think this is the case. And that's the problem. People outside of our community couldn't give a shit about this. And when you've got a situation like that, it's all right for us going on Twitter, oh my God, yeah, this is terrible. Jeff Johns is terrible. Oh, this one's terrible. Sack them all. That's great. But after a while, it falls on deaf ears because the people that they care about are the normies. The mainstream audience, right? The families, the kids. They don't care. They don't care how a movie is made or who's treated how. It's like the shoes that you're wearing, the shoes I'm wearing from Primark, right? That were probably made using slave labor or something. How often do I think about those poor people who made my shoes or my trousers or this? How often do we think about that? And we should, but we don't. Nobody cares. That's the problem. So, Warner Brothers Pictures and Warner Media don't want this getting out there to the populace, right? But you know what? It doesn't matter. Because people are still going to go and watch James Gunn's The Suicide Squad and Space Jam and the rest of it, right? And we're just seeing, after all the revelations about Warner Brothers Pictures for the past year or two, and still people went to see Godzilla versus Kong in their droves. Nobody cares. And that's the problem you've got, everyone. We can trend Restore the Snyderverse and Deathstroke on HBO Max, and that's great. That shows us there's an interest and the trends are interesting and great. But I think we're in this situation, we're on this borderline situation now where I don't see where we go next apart from keep on doing events. Because I don't think when you're asking for things and you're abusive or you're disrespectful, you make these accusations, that's necessarily going to kind of bring a situation where a company goes, all right then, let's compromise. They don't want to compromise with you because you keep on accusing them of being shitty people. That's the problem. Then they accuse us of being shitty people. So it's a merry-go-round. It's a domino effect, everyone. And that's the thing that we've got here. It's disappointing because it's interesting. Ethan Van Sciver, a former Scifer. Is it Ethan Van Sciver? That's his name. We all know who he is. He's a former comic book writer. Bit of a rebel now. I think he's a right-winger. He does lots of stuff on YouTube. But he was defending Jeff Johns, saying he was a great guy, blah, 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 and he's not a racist. I don't know if having Ethan as a defence is going to do Jeff any good, to be honest with you. You see, as I've belabelled on this video and many videos, you're not perfect, and I'm not perfect. Maybe you have lots of racist thoughts in your head without speaking them, right? Maybe now and again, I've thought wrongly in my head. And I apologise if I have. I apologise for all bad behaviour I've ever had. But that's the point. We live in an era where we keep on having to apologise for being human, for making mistakes, doing the wrong things, because we all do them. And this is the situation now. The Justice League reshoots were 4 years ago now. 2016, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, nearly 5 years ago, right? It's a long time ago. Whedon's gone. It's pretty clear that Johns is not, and Toby Emmerich are not going without going kicking and screaming. And also, as I've said many months ago, unless you've got something solid, you can't get rid of these people. Yes, it's uncomfortable. I did notice in that Hollywood Reporter article, Jeff Johns is now sniping back. You know, obviously he's using a representative. But ultimately, Jeff Johns will come out. Jeff Johns will talk about this. There will be visual interviews. And once that happens, I hope that Ray is ready for it, because it's easy to make accusations and be the big man when no one's answering back. But when these people answer back, because you've weaponized them, you know, these are not just names, Jeff Johns and Toby Emmerich and Warner Brothers Pictures. These are very powerful people. And there's a lot of stuff that Ray's done that you can say isn't exactly on the level. There's a lot of stuff he says that's bang on and spot on, and I back him every way, and I respect the man's bravery, no question. But this interview again does nothing. It makes them look bad for a few days, a few hours. It doesn't restore the Snyderverse. And that's my priority, everyone. So what do you think about all of this? As I say, this hurts the fans. Basically, we're still kind of fans in a franchise, that is an absolute mess. There's some really good films in it, but it's a mess. The continuity is a mess, everything. And we just want someone to run it, who can run it properly, who can make it successful. Now, we don't know if Walter Hamada is going to be a success or not. I'm very sure we'll find out in next year's 4 DCEU movies. But the core movie is Flashpoint. If that fails, he's a failure. He's gone. And then who knows what's going to happen. As I said yesterday while reading this interview on a video, if I was in charge of AT&T, I would put out the order to cancel the DCEU. Get rid of it. And start again. Not in a few years straight away. Just get rid of it and start again. And bring someone in who can do this properly. Who can, as a commercial commodity, can make it successful, but make these films entertaining and people be entertained. Now, even if you start again, there's always going to be kind of the Snyderverse people who are always going to be sniping on Twitter. And I understand that. But in the end, you have to, as a business, say, let them say what they want. We've got a business to run, right? Because we've got our beautiful DC Snyderverse trilogy. I want more. I want more. But I also got a beautiful trilogy to watch. So I'm happy about that. But this is always going to be a conversation. I think even if Zack's Snyderverse is restored, people are always going to be sniping at WB Pictures. And we never move on. And it's negative. And it's toxic. I don't know how long I will stay on social media, how long I'll do these videos for, because it's just shouty and negative all the time. And it's boring. Because right now, I've been talking for 34 minutes, not about the DC movies or the comics, but about one actor doing an interview. That may serve his purpose, but it doesn't serve my purpose. And I'm nobody's fucking puppet. And so I want to celebrate DC Comics and their live action history and their live action future. Because identity politics may be other people's obsession, but it's not mine. I'm here and I get up in the morning because I'm motivated about writing stories, watching great movies, watching great TV dramas. That is my motivation. I don't give a shit about identity politics, either on the left side or the right side. I just don't fucking care. I deal with every single person in this world on a one-to-one individual basis, no matter where they come from, what colour their skin is. That's it. That's who I am, and that's how I conduct myself. If you think that's wrong, if you think I'm a straight white male piece of shit, then I'm a straight white male piece of shit. That's up to you. Make up your own minds. But anyway, that's it for today. So comment down below, like, share and subscribe, and I'll be back tomorrow, hopefully, for more DCEU Daily. See you again soon.